Well, hopefully you can all hear us. Welcome to our GrainCorp webinar. My name's Ken Winter. I'm a technical support manager based in the Waikato, and Maree Collins will be joining us further on in the presentation. Interesting times with COVID-19. I hope you guys are all keeping safe in your bubble. What's really cool though is listening to people all around New Zealand and listening to how they totally respect and appreciate you, the farmer, as do we here in GrainCorp. So congratulations, guys. Hopefully we can keep this reasonably interactive. And as Maree's already mentioned, we will try and answer questions as we go through, but if we can't get to them, hopefully we can answer them at the end of the session, or there will be an opportunity for you to email those or phone us through with those later on today. So to kick this off, the topics today: the importance of preparing well. Number 2, pasture covers, targets and feed planning. Financial impacts of milking longer versus drying off, and what can be achieved over the dry period. So I think we all know that this is the time to be preparing for next season. It's pretty much a given, but the focus today is on how to prepare well. So the next slide, this one here, is basically a snippet of what Tracker is. And when I say a snippet, I mean a snippet. So if you're not quite sure what Tracker is, maybe you're not a GrainCorp client. Tracker is a program, a technical support program to help identify limitations and potential gains. It's a service that we provide free to our GrainCorp clients. So in effect, what it is, we take data from your dairy company that gets loaded into the software program. On top of that, we add cow numbers and the breed. We also load in the expected calving dates, and then we also set a target. So if we're looking at the screen, we're basically, I'll just change this. No, I can't change it. Okay, so this light red line that you see through here is obviously historical data. Then the program runs this. Lost the mouse, someone do it for me. Okay, the program calculates a predicted production curve based on your cow numbers and your breed and the target that we set. So what we can see here, looking at this exact example, we can see there's a limitation there right in the start of the season that's based around transitioning the cows. Then we've lost quite a bit of production around the peak period. So we know we've got some major issues post-calving. That's also affecting the ability to persist with a higher peak for longer, and we're obviously missing out a lot of summer days. The reason I've got this slide here, this clearly identifies some massive gains that we can make and some major limitations. So what the next slide actually presents is an actual farm. So this farm we visited in 2016. They carved down about 610 cows. That light red line is obviously the historical data. So typically this herd is doing about 434 kgs, around that mark, consistently year on, year out. So when I met this farm, I've never met them before, didn't know the farm, didn't know who they were. Went out there with one of the other territory managers. We set this up, we downloaded the data from the dairy company, we set in all the information that we had, and we put a target in there, relative, probably more of a conservative target to see where we could help them. One of the challenges, if we don't set that target high enough, we don't see where the real gaps are. But one of the reasons I've got the slide up here today is that these guys are particularly good at setting up for a new season. So even though we've only set this target a little bit above where they were, they still managed to pick up about another 25,000 milk solids in that season. So on the next slide, you'll actually see this is the areas I want to focus on for setting up for a good season. Our PC, which is pasture cover, at start of the winter and at the start of covering. Now these guys are very good. They're very good at, oops, sorry. Get off. Sorry. These guys are very good at assessing pasture doing budgets, planning pasture covers. They're very focused on getting the cows in the right condition for calving. And the other thing that's very good that they do is have their young stock very well grown. Knowing these factors and knowing that they're set up well, we can then lift this blue dotted line a lot higher. So if we have a look at the next slide, you'll see we've lifted that production significantly. So we've now set a new target of 560 kgs of milk solids per cow. So that tells us a very different story now. So if we look at where we are in the springtime, there's a lot of extra production that we can pick up. We can get the cows to a higher peak. We can maintain that peak a lot longer. And that basically means, oh, got control of this there, have I? Cool. Basically means we can fill this whole shed through here and gain a big amount of production before we get to a summer period. Well, so yeah, sorry, flicking here. So the proof on the pudding, where does it come to? If we go through to 2019, there's that exact same production target, but now we've actually fulfilled that with our cows. So I think most of you would appreciate that this year's been pretty trying as far as rainfall goes. You can see along this line here, they've basically been pretty much on target for 560 a cow, but they're just starting to tail off a little bit through here. And we've got a gap in here where we've dropped through this particularly dry summer. So the exciting part about that is we've got another area that we can fine tune next season to see how we can fill that gap. Let's have a look at the key things that we need to focus on to be very good at planning. First one is we have to be able to assess pasture cover and pasture growth. That's a given. We need to be talking this language all the time. Second point, we want to have our pasture cover average at a particular target that is relative to our production target for the season. Next point is to make sure we have our average pasture cover set for the start of calving. Now, I don't know, there's actually a film, I don't know if it's a Tom Cruise one, With Me, Without Me. You might know the name of that film, I can't think of what it is, but if you think about setting up a season, say it's perfect, and this was the ultimate production that you could gain by the end of the year, the fact is every time we miss an opportunity to set up for that total production, we lower the potential gain or potential production we can get for the season. So look, I've done hundreds of feed plans, and most of the time what I see the limitation comes from is not having the start of calving pasture cover where we need it to be. Typically what happens if we get to that stage, what we tend to do is start rationing out feed. So if we're a little bit short of feed coming up to calving, we can't quite put the feed into those dry cows. We probably haven't made the condition gain that we like. The next stage is, once we get to calving the cows, we start scrimping a little bit on our springers. So we're probably already compromising the integrity of the liver at that stage. Following on from that, we get into our colostrum cows, and then you start seeing guys holding their cows back behind a fence, limiting those, and the next step is the milkers. And quite often, you talk to farmers and they would love to give the cows another paddock of grass if they had it, but they haven't got the feed there, so they are totally lowering the potential production for that whole season. The next thing that we need to be really au fait with is body condition scoring. We should be looking at our body condition score all the way through the season, so it should be just a natural thing that we look at, second nature. Maree is going to talk a lot more about body condition scoring through the dry period and what you can do, but we need to have this focus all year. Now, the reason I say that, if we're putting on weight while we're milking, it means we can get to the stage when we dry off, we have very little weight gain that we need to put on. That means we can have a very easy winter, and it's then easier to get our average pasture cover where we want it at the start of calving. The other thing about putting condition score on, or condition gain while we're milking, it's a nice healthy gain. You're building muscle and fat together. The other key thing that we need to be looking at is supplements on hand. What sort of supplements do we need and when do we need them? Okay, next point I want to talk about is feed plans. Are we proactively planning to realise the genetic potential of the herd and the production potential of your farm? Or you're simply looking at filling feed gaps to continue doing the same production that you're doing now? So there is a very big difference when you think about feed planning and budgets. So let's have a look at that. Whoops. Proactive feeding, a proactive feed plan will provide information needed to correct factors limiting historical performance. Secondly, it can outline the financial gains by implementing better practices. So look, we're very lucky in GrainCorp in that we have the tracker program. If we've set our production target where it's potentially giving us the best benefits, that can simply overload into a full proactive feed plan so that we make sure we're doing the right amount of feeding at the right time with the right product. In behind that, we load in the costs of all their different feeds, and we can actually have a margin and monitor that margin weekly, daily, monthly to see that we're actually on target. The cool part about setting up a very good substantial feed plan is it now becomes a blueprint and a starting point for continued improvements. Simply calculating a feed shortage over a season with just dry matter and meat is very handy at times, but it's not what we're looking at to basically move on. Big question right now, and hopefully there's enough farmers out there have had enough rain to maybe be considering milking on. If I keep milking, what are the things that I need to consider? So let's just recap some of the things that we've just covered at the moment. First thing is, if we keep milking, can we still meet our average pasture cover by June 1? That's the first point. Second point, can we still reach our body condition score target by start of calving? Now, this is all going to relate back to what target you've set, which back calculates to where our average pasture cover needs to be for both those dates. Third point is it profitable? And last point, number 4, will it create any shortfall on the feed plan? So is it going to be detrimental or is it going to have a positive effect? What I've done here is I've actually taken a real example of a farm. This is based in the Waikato. It's a 500 cow herd. That's what they carved down. They're not stocked heavily, stocked at about 2.5 cows per hectare. These are Friesian cows at about 530 kilos live weight. And at the time when I got a phone call on the 21st, these cows are doing about 1.5 kgs of milk solid. What had happened over those last couple of weeks is that the growth rate had gone from about 30 kilos of dry matter per day in pasture, and it's jumped up to about 50. So the farmer rang me on this day and said, Ken, just want a bit of an idea. Do you think we should be drying off or can we afford to keep milking on? So the first thing we asked is, what's the grass cover? Fortunately, this farmer had just plate meat at his farm, and his answer was 2,400 cover, and we're growing 50 a day. My first reaction was, well, that's pretty awesome. Are we sure? Now, the reason I'm asking this question is this is the first time this farmer has done pasture metering. Actually, it might be worthwhile me giving a little bit of background on the farm. 2 years ago, one of my colleagues started working with these guys. They'd seen what we do with Tracker and what we do with our feed plan. So we went along, we set them up on Tracker, and 2 seasons ago, they basically lifted production about 17,500 milk solids. This season, we decided we're going to be a little bit more scientific and aggressive, so they've actually purchased a plate meter. So we're now actually recording the grass that's growing. We're looking at the total amount of grass that the farm is capable of growing and matching the two up with a very proactive feed plan. So this feed plan, we set a target that was well above what they would normally consider as being possible. It was targeting around about 530 kilos milk solids a cow. whereas typically about 2 years ago, they were around about 400. Now, the reason for doing that was basically to see where the limitations are and what the potential was by lining the cows up with what the farm was growing. So it's a big learning curve. So when we run these guys, and the other thing to consider is this farm is basically all grass with an in-shed feed system. They don't grow crops apart from making silage. They have a bale feeder, so they don't even have a feeder wagon. So it's just an in-shed feed system with a bale feeder. So putting that all into context, when we now look at where they are, we've actually dropped the cover back to 2200 to be safe, just to allow for the fact that there's a bit of chickweed in that. And so if we've got our calibrations right, let's be on the safe side. So we dropped our cover to 2200. The cows are around about 4.5 condition score at the moment, so they've come through quite well. They've been following behind with a little bit of nitrogen. So with the bit of rain that we've had, we've finally seen a real kick in growth rates. So now we're up to about 50 a day. Prior to that, we were feeding about 6 kilos of grass, 3 of grass silage, 6 kilos of meal. So a fair amount of supplement was going in to fill that shortage through the summer. Now, while it was a lot of supplement going in, the key thing is they were making a margin over their purchase feed of $6.80 a day on that milk production. So it's definitely worth doing. So what we need to work out now is a quick calculation to see, is it viable for them to keep milking? So typically this farm would be dry around the end of April, maybe the first week in May. So what we're looking at, 423 milkers, we know that they are getting about 10 kilos in the way of grass and silage. We've just been able to drop out the silage, so getting about 10 kilos. What we want to do is lift that up to around about 14 kilos intake on grass. So if we look at what the cow requires, we've got 423 milkers. We want 14 kilos of grass down their throat, which would be nice. That's about 5,900 kilos of dry matter. I've allowed in here 90 heifers. So typically these won't come home till the 1st of May, but I've put that in there in case some farmers have found their grazer is struggling and they've had to bring them home early. So 90 heifers, 10 kilos a day, 900. That's our total requirements in dry matter per day. But what we know, because we're plate metering and we're checking our growth rates, we're getting 50 kilos a day at the moment. 50 kilos times 200 hectares, we're growing 10,000. So we're making a surplus when we take off our requirements of 6,800. Over the whole farm, we're picking up a surplus of over 3,000 kilos a day. So if we take that surplus, multiply it by the 41 days, so that was from the 21st when we did this analysis, to right up to the end of May, then divide that by the hectares, that shows us the net increase we're making per hectare. We add that to the current pasture cover, we end up with a cover of 2,854. Now, we don't know what the growth rate's going to be next week, but it could come back. Hey, it could be 70 a day next week. Soil moisture's down, but we get a dollop of rain. We've got this nitrogen on, the farm's growing. We could have more grass than we know. So the key thing out of this is that we know with that simple calculation, we're going to have a heap of feed in on the 1st of June. Now, the other very valuable point about this is we've done a very proactive feed budget for a 12-month period. We know typically this farm wants to sit around 2,400 cover for 1st of June. We're already going to be sitting at 28 by fully feeding the cows. So we know we've got plenty of grass. So what's the next thing that we need to look at? Whoops. Let's check we've got that right. Yep, okay. Next thing we want to look at, what's the diet going to look like? Well, it'd be lovely to be feeding even 12 kilos a day. 14 kilo a day is where I want to basically max the grass. And the reason I say that, We've gone from
Can I just interrupt? We've got a question that someone's just asked. Joanne has asked, what length are they sitting on at the moment? Could you answer that for Joanne?
Average pasture cover right now is 2,400 cover. They're going at the milkers are going into 27 and they're leaving 1,600 behind. So they're on basically a 50-day rotation. So they're getting 4 hectares a day. So what that means is if they're going into 2,700, leaving 16, there's about 1,100 that they're eating per hectare. 4 hectares a day means that they're using 4,400 kilos, and it works out at basically 10 kilos of grass per cow per day. Hopefully that covers it. So that actually raises a very valid point. All the way through the season, you're going to get little opportunities, and if you don't grab them and utilize them, you'll never get them back. So that basically lowers our potential gain. So if we're sitting there now feeding 10 kilos of dry matter per cow, and we want to up it to 14, we've got to take the initiative to step up the amount of land we're going to offer. So on that same number of cows, we're going to increase the grazing up to around, I put the figures here actually, yeah, we need to increase it to about 5.47 hectares per day to increase their intake to 14. Hopefully that covers that question. So now we're going to limit, it'd be nice to limit the feed to 14, 12 to 14. The reason we want to limit it, if all of a sudden we offer them 18 kilos if they could eat it, there's so much crude protein in there, a lot of it's just going to go to waste, and we're going to waste feed. The other point is with that excess amount of crude protein, the cow is going to have to convert a lot of extra ammonium that they can't use, and that takes up energy. They'll need to detoxify it by turning it into urea and dumping it through the kidneys. So high nitrogen patches that just wasted feed. So by limiting it to 14 kilos and adding in this case here, I've got an example where we might feed 4 to 5 kilos of a high ME feed, high starch. This is 60 cents a kilo fresh weight delivered, including all the minerals and freight. So instead of actually bringing up all the details to show the workings, I've simply put it through a very robust program called Diet Check. And in Diet Check, we've loaded in the live weight of the cows, we've loaded in the stage of lactation, we've put in the climate, the number of Ks they're walking, the humidity, we've loaded in the fat, protein, the total diet, including, when I'm looking at this meal, breaking it down by component. So then we've also focused on the fact we want to gain about half a kilo of live weight per day. If we do that over just 30 days, we've got pretty close to putting on half a condition score while we're milking. So we've set this up, I've run the diet, these match pretty closely, and we can start looking at what sort of money we're making. But here's a very important thing to take on board. If we look at what the cows were doing at the end of March, it was about 1.4 milk solids per cow. So from there to about the second, going into the third week of April, the cows had climbed to 1.5. So they've made a significant climb. So it's about the increased grass that they were picking up. So it's pretty obvious we're short on dry matter intake. The nice thing about Tracker is we can jump on Tracker at that very same time, and if we set the target right, it will tell us what production they should be doing and how many kilos of dry matter we need to be feeding at that time. So the point I'm making here is when you see those cows starting to climb, it's showing that the cows can respond to the extra grass or extra feed. That's the opportune time to start looking at how far can you push the cows. Now the catches. Let's say we're sitting on a 50-day rotation. The grass is building up nicely. The cows have lifted to 1.5. It would be very easy to sit there and think, hey, I'm doing okay, and not take the opportunity to start increasing the grass. The challenge is if we don't do that, you'll probably end up with pasture that's getting way too long. You've missed the opportunity to get this production gain. And the other thing is if they're sitting there or they start to fall, and we know they're short on dry matter intake, we're missing an opportunity to put weight on the cow, and they might actually be going backwards, and they could actually start dropping off from production again. So looking at something like this, we factor in the whole feed. We know that the margin over all feeds, so that's including the grass, if they're doing 1.63, we've targeted lifting the production because we're going to feed them more. We did it while they're rising. We know that on a $7.30 payout, the margin over all the feeds, which is the meal and the grass, is now $7.92 per cow per day. If we take off the cost of the grass, because you're going to be feeding that to dry cows anyway, your margin over purchase feed is actually $9.18 per cow per day, which is actually a very good result. Okay. So let's look now. Oh, I've lost control. We're not moving on slides. Let's just see if I can bring that up. Oh, come on board now. Okay, so let's have a look at the financial returns. We take the lower of those two figures, $7.92 margin over all feeds. I've only multiplied it by 26 days for a very good reason. Typically, we've got enough grass to get to the end of May in most seasons. I'm looking to see what we can gain over May. So multiply the margin over $7.92 by 26 days by 423 cows. So we're going to be dry around about the 25th, 26th of May. That could net us $87,000 extra on this prediction. Next thing to look at, what are the alternatives? If we made that, what could we do with it? So if we divide that money, and so keep in mind, this is profit, this is not production, this is profit after cost of expenses. At 50 cents, which is pretty dear for silage, you could end up buying 174 tonne of grass silage, which is pretty awesome. Okay, next step. Hello, something's come up there. Oh, slow. Feed plan. Okay, typically this farm, on the feed plan we did for this season, this here, we'd like to have about 80 tonne of dry matter in the way of grass and silage to get through the winter and the spring and have no sort of hiccups. This season, this farm has used a lot of their reserves, so we're down to about 20 tonne. That's all we've got to get through the winter. So if we took that grass and used it to buy feed, we can now buy the extra 60 tonne. Next slide. Is it coming up? Yep. We're going to have to buy extra 60 tonne of grass silage. And the reason we're talking grass silage is simply this is a rolling farm. They have a bale feeder, and they like to be able to get on the pastures without making a mess, which is why they haven't got a big feed-up wagon, and they don't want to be feeding palm on the paddocks. Next piece. If this all progresses the way we're looking at it, we can buy all that feed and we have a cash surplus of around $57,000. So is it profitable? Yes. So the key things are, just to sum up, on the current growth rates that we have now, and fully feeding these cows on 14 kilos of grass, we can achieve our pasture cover by 1st of June, 2,400 cover. We're putting weight on the cows, so we're looking after our condition score. We should be pretty close to our calving condition score by the end of May. And we've got all the reserves we need to make sure we get through winter and spring. All right, what I'll do now is hand over to Maree, who will talk a little bit further about body condition score and putting weight on cows over the dry period. You there, Maree? Maree, you're on mute. Have you got your... Oh. So guys, so we just had a technical hitch. Just while Maree comes on, this would be an opportune time to maybe ask some of those questions.
Thank you, Ken. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Okay.
So I don't know if my internet had crashed, or good old Taranaki down here, maybe things weren't working as well. So Ken has certainly... no, so look, the technical, I don't know why my video is not working, so sorry, maybe you can't see my bad hair day to day, or you'll just have to hear my voice. So Ken has talked about, you know, whether we milk on or not, and now whether we obviously get to a point in the season where we are dry. So now I want to talk about what can be achieved during the dry period, and a lot of what we do in the dry period, people always think about body condition score. But obviously, look, it is about resting that mammary gland as well. But if we were talking about body condition score at dry off, what are the targets? So people obviously, look, 5 is often said as being the target. 5 is the target for, you know, our mature cows, but we really do need our first and second calvers to be at 5.5. Now, you know, so we've got those targets, but now we also need to try and have our herd as tight as possible. So we really want to have less than 15% below those targets and no more than 15% above those targets either. Now, the reason we don't want that happening is because there are obviously detrimental health and financial reasons to having them above or below. So for our cows below target, we certainly would have less production next year, but we'd also have fewer. I'm just going to try again, guys, to turn my video on. So production-wise would be less of that light. We'd also have reproductive problems, but we'd also have more health issues, and so mastitis and metritis is an issue. So, you know, is getting them bigger better? No. So we also then start the risk of, you know, like metabolic problems over transition and during calving. So if we move on to the next slide, Angela.
Right there, we just have no volume coming through.
It's kicked me out. Oh, I'm back. I'm back. Can you hear me now? Hello. Good. Thank you, Ken. So this table here, 18 milk solid response. If you move those cows from a 3 to a 4 at a $5.50 payout, $99, $139 benefit. Now, obviously, moving them only half a body condition score from a 3.5 to a 4 is 109. But, you know, it just goes to show, you know, there are some feel-good factors about that. People are less looking at us about our cows, but there's also some financial benefits to it. If we now look at the next slide, Angela. So we've identified that we've got a need to put body condition score on our cows over the dry period. These are the 3 factors we now need to consider. The time we have available to do it, the amount of feed required to do it, and the type of feed we could use to achieve that body condition score gain. So let's now look at time first. So the time, you know, we dry off our cows, whether it's now or it's the 1st of May, 2 weeks post dry off, whether it's you're drying them off on hay, straw, silage. That first 2 weeks is a very stressful period, and they often do not put weight on. And for some cows, if they are held very tightly and have any sort of health issues, mastitis at dry off, can certainly lose weight. So that's at the start of the dry period. Then at the end of dry period, the demand that is required to sustain that pregnancy increases dramatically every 2 weeks. They get closer to calving. So, you know, often they don't gain a lot of body condition score in that last month. There's a bit of a rule of thumb that most people work to, and that is that it's very rare for cows to gain more than half a body condition score per month. Now, there's a question there that sort of says, and so I brought it up because someone's mentioned it to me in the past, if cows gain body condition score fast, will it affect them next season? Look, the really short answer is no. Dairy NZ has done trial work with cows, fed high levels of pasture and PK, late lactation, and during the dry period, and saw no difference in milk production or health the following season. So, you know, that sometimes people talk about fast on, fast off. Dairy NZ's trial work says that they didn't see any difference. So if we go to the next slide, so we've talked about that we need to gain weight. We've talked about the time it's required. How much can we give our cows to gain that body condition score? So we've got a slight limiting factor of a dry cow's intake is only 2.1 to 2.4% of their live weight. So then we need to break it down into these 5 categories: maintenance, pregnancy, live weight gain, weather conditions. Now that's something that sometimes people don't factor in, and then activity. So if we look at, I've got a table here. So we look at a 500 kilo crossbred cow. Maintenance is 59 ME. Pregnancy, I've calculated this on 70 days away from calving. That's 13 ME. Live weight gain, it's the thinnest, one of the thinnest cows we've got. We want her to absolutely gain the most we can. We're going to push it to that half a body condition score per month, 47 ME. Weather conditions here I haven't factored in, but take into account a thin cow. So we're talking a body condition score 3 or 3.5, has very little subcutaneous fat. And then when you've got conditions, perhaps it's 0, it's a really cold day, or it's raining, it's windy, they do require a little bit more dry matter to take into account those thin cows. Activity, just take into account, are these cows walking back to a feed pad to be fed? Are they walking up and down a hill? It's not a huge amount to calculate in. So I haven't got any in there now, but that's 120 ME to gain that on that cow. So we've talked about time, we've talked about the amount of ME to give them. Now let's talk about the type of feed we could use to do that. So this table here is a table that has come out of a course I've done. It's called Feed Right. It's a Dairy NZ course. So at the top, we've got all the different types of feed: autumn pasture, pasture silage, right through to fodder beet. Down the side, we've got cows and the average live weight. Now look, there's a little typo there. We don't have our Jersey cows sitting at 30 kgs of live weight. That's supposed to be 300. So we've got a Holstein Friesian at 500. If she was going to gain a body condition score over the dry period, she would need to put on 33 kilos of live weight. So we've just talked about a cow requiring 120 kilos of 120 or 119 ME per day. So if we were using these feeds on this table, if we did it with PK, that would be 125 kilos of feed to put on a body condition score, and it would be 215 kilos of kale. They're exactly the same ME, but the difference in feed. So if we're getting 119 ME for those cows, that 500 kilo crossbred, 70 days away from calving, we can use feeds that are far more effective, that are putting on live weight. So if you've done your feed budget with your consultant or a GrainCorp, had a sit-down appointment with us and we've worked out your shorter feed, don't panic if you can't buy some pasture silage in. PK, it's been proven by Dairy NZ, is the most effective feed available to put on weight. So we can use autumn pasture, some pasture silage, and some PK to balance that feed and that diet out so that the cows can put on weight over the dry period. GrainCorp has got some specifically designed dry feed, ProCow 20, that certainly has no risk about transitioning on and off and can be safely fed during the dry period. So obviously in a webinar we can't address all of the issues individually. We've had some questions that are quite sort of need to have a sit down and have a chat with them. We would love to obviously contact you all or have a phone conversation with the local rep to address some of those questions. But we're also planning another webinar. So last year in Taranaki, we ran some on some farmer seminars that were very successful. This one here, the picture is from Inglewood, and it was all on transition management, minimising milk fever, setting up for that new season. So we'd like to roll these out in a webinar. We're going to plan it for next Wednesday, the 6th of March. We're going to do it in the evening. So grab a glass of wine and a beer, join us. We've got a guest speaker coming on, Alan Faulkner from obviously is one of our supply companies from Nutritech, supporting us in that webinar. But we actually haven't put together the format for that webinar yet. So fire your questions through, and we've got another slide here with the contact details. Fire them through to our customer services team on customerservices@graincorp.co.nz, or if that something else in today's session has sparked a question that you want, contact us on 0800 300 313, or and they'll certainly transfer you to one of the reps, or send us an email. Thank you for your time today.
Just a minute, Maree.
Yes.
Look, we've got a couple of questions here that were relative to probably the earlier part of the presentation. I'm more than happy to answer them right now.
Yep. So I'll go for it, Ken. I'm sorry about the technical issues there earlier.
Okay, so one of them, the first one is, how often do you evaluate the feed budget as the season changes? So typically we'll set up a full proactive feed plan for the year, and then we do those minor calculations, like we work out the feed required for milking on. We can do that as we go. So it's adaptable as we start. The second question, just clear this out of the way. Why would you want to be targeting an average pasture cover of 2,800? Definitely we're not. This is exactly so. If I didn't explain it, when we calculated out the feed, we would have ended up with a 2,800 cover. So it clearly identifies that we can be feeding a lot more feed to get our cover back towards 2,400 cover by the 1st of June. Would you not be better to feed more pasture now and no supplements? You could still increase average pasture cover, but not buy a supplement. Hopefully we've covered that in the questions, that the reason for that was, once again, if we feed a copious amount of crude protein at the moment, the cows can't convert it as well as they could with a balanced diet, so you'll be squirting a lot of that out the other end, and there's all the energy involved to basically detoxify it. So hopefully we've covered that question earlier on in the presentation. Another question, what is the cost of the tracker program and how do I get on it? Well, as I said at the start, this is free as for our loyal GrainCorp clients, but if you're wanting to look at that, we'll come and have a chat to you. So look, that's pretty much it as far as the answers that I can say. Oh, hang on, we've got more here. How do you go? Okay, so we've got a question here. Can you go over the relative costs of home-grown feed, autumn pasture silage for live weight gain versus palm kernel? Well, looks like we've covered that pretty closely with the answer from Maree that she's just done. Any other questions, as Maree said, please forward them through. We'd love to follow up and see how we can help you. Anything else you'd like to add, Maree?
No, thank you everyone for giving up their time this afternoon. Hopefully it's been informative to everyone. And if not, I guess fire it through and we'll do our best.
All good. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.